Hey, this is Jeff Waters from the metal band Annihilator, and you're listening to the one and only Sonic Perspectives.
Hello, music fans. I'm Samantha Buckman, and I'm here to bring you another interview for Sonic Perspectives. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with a well-known name in the world of thrash and beyond, none other than Jeff Waters of the legendary and long-standing band Annihilator. How are you doing today?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So we're here to talk about some pretty large happenings in the world of Annihilator. But before I get there, I want to talk about an anniversary that came up in 2019. From what I understand, 2019 marked Annihilator's 30-year anniversary. Annihilator is old enough to have moved out, settled down, and started a family. Yet you managed to finish a 43-date tour that spanned over 18 countries. How does it feel to keep up such an intense touring schedule this far into your career?
Yeah, it's been, I think, 89, so a little more, 30 years and a little bit since we put out our first record, and I had the band going for 5 years before that, kind of learning how to play guitar and doing demos and moving from one city to another to find musicians to actually start the band. I then got signed in 88, and 89 was the first record. Now we're all the way up to, I'm almost 54 years old, and 17th studio record's coming out next week, I think, or so. And, it's been quite the, let's just say, a strange and interesting and unique career, so to speak. It's, I live in the UK for the last couple of years, but, I am a Canadian who lived in Canada his whole life, but started the band there. Ended up here in the UK, got married, and moved over to my wife's country, and built a recording studio, blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on. But, it's been a long career. We started out having maybe 2 or 3 albums that North America, my home country, Canada, and the United States would have known if you're around and in the metal scene way back from 89 to 93, on MTV and doing lots of great tours with bands like Testament and doing our own tours. And you heard a lot about us back then, but then we literally dropped off the face of the, let's say, the North American continent for decades unless you discovered us on the internet. And we didn't drop off anywhere in Europe. We continued putting out 12.5 records, since the beginning. I've been touring almost every year over in Japan and Europe, and occasionally dropping into, 70,000 tons of metal boat cruises close to the U.S. or departing from Fort Lauderdale or Miami in the U.S., but never really played back in the States and Canada for forever, and basically didn't have a real official release there other than on import for a long time, and still I think this one's just barely getting released too, and we're trying to see if we can get down there to tour in our own country in 2020 if we can pull it off this year. But it's definitely an interesting career. We finished a 2-month tour, like you mentioned, from October to December that just passed, and it's grueling as heck for me as a guitar player and singer now, so you have to try to keep in shape and be healthy and make good choices here and get ready for these things, otherwise you end up flat in the floor with a heart attack, to be as blunt as possible. But it's a lot of work and a lot of fun and great career and having a lot of fun.
Your schedule is absolutely grueling. You just mentioned all of these tours, especially in the European tour circuit. But as you said, this is your 17th studio album upcoming, and it's titled Ballistic, Sadistic. So I know that in prior interviews, you said that you believe that this is one of your best records, but there's no question it's going to be compared to your earlier works. So independent from the existing Annihilator discography, how would you describe this new album?
It's not some kind of, and Annihilator was, it's not really some groundbreaking new type of sound or band or anything. Well, for example, when Pantera came out, way back, early 90s, let's say, I know they were around with albums like Power Metal and that, but when they came out with their heavy stuff, Cowboys from Hell, way back in the day, that was groundbreaking. Yes, they had the Sabbath, Metallica, and Van Halen combined, but the way they put it together, that was a new sound. That was a new image. That was a new everything. And bands would come out like Priest. That was new. That was, groundbreaking. Metallica came out. That was groundbreaking. Annihilator is not like that, and we've never been, and this new album is not some kind of groundbreaking new sound and style. Annihilator has been and will always be sort of like a celebration of all my favorite heavy metal and thrash metal influences mixed with ballads and classical guitar and goofy things and a whole bunch of different things in there. So we're not part of that group that started a scene. The only thing that we were kind of known originally for was doing some technical and fast and starts and stops with the music on the first couple of records that weren't really being done at that time, and the way I mixed things together wasn't really being done at that time, and then it started happening a little bit after that. So, but no, I'd say the new record is I don't want to downplay it, but it's just another Annihilator thrash heavy metal celebration record put together from my 50 favorite guitar players and bands, So, yeah, I'm not trying to cut it down. I'm not trying to put it up. I think this is just our style, and it's hard to explain it. I'm not trying to sell it. It's just what I do, and hopefully people like it.
You did mention, so when you first started, what you were doing was new and exciting. But Annihilator's become such a big name that these things are almost expected. So how does it feel to kind of move from that cutting edge to just the status quo?
Well, I think, again, it depends kind of how, well, I'm just saying it from my experience and my opinion and my unique situation with this band is, in my life is, a lot of bands that I know and heard of and this and that. There's some bands that, of course, they maybe the main driving force in the band or one person or two people or whatever. Sometimes it's artistic. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's fame. Sometimes it's ego. And how many more records can we sell and how much more money can we make? And I've always, of course, who wouldn't like to buy another car or have these toys or have a little extra or, to do what you want, whether it's donated to charity or to help your family or friends or to blow on stuff that's wasteful. I'm sure nobody's going to turn down hard-earned money if it comes in, but my goal wasn't that at the beginning at all. To money, and I mean, even put it in perspective, I started the band late teens. It wasn't about cigarettes, beer, and girls, which it became about for a few years after that, because I was all about staying in my freaking bedroom 8 hours a day playing guitar and trying to learn how to play and write songs and do that. I didn't, cigarettes and beer, which came up for 4 straight years after I had my first album out, that was not my goal. I didn't care about this stuff. It was all about music. And money, I didn't give a crap about as long as I could eat and make, write songs and get better. So when I got my first record deal and things hit, again, it wasn't about I want to be on the cover of guitar magazines. I don't have a singer that was on the cover of magazines. I want to have these amazing videos, and I want to be recognized everywhere in millions of records, or I want to be the best band out there. It was completely none of that. I just wanted to get a record deal and fit in to a category of music that I loved and be a part of that, even if it wasn't number one or selling lots. I just wanted to get in there. And so it was more of an artistic drive. And over the years, with the success we've had overseas, financially and, playing big places and selling shirts and doing all the stuff we're doing, it all became about making enough money, taking care of business to make enough money to survive, to do that. I can pay my guys more money that I hire in my band, or I can get a better piece of studio equipment or some more guitars, or, it wasn't about fame and fortune. It was just about surviving, being able to artistically be able to do what I want. And so that's really where I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because I'm at a certain level where a lot of people might not know me or the band, but I don't care. My fans know, and I'm not out there trying to grab more fans. It's just like, hey, here's my record, and I really hope you like it.
So you would say that this is still very much a project of love and passion.
Yeah, this is number one, yeah. I mean, it's a business, too. In music business, you have to take care of your business as a band member or a band in order to survive if you want to keep doing this for a living. But it's still, the music's what I love. And, the other side of that is, I guess a lot of fans or people might think that, well, yeah, but maybe some of your records weren't good, or we didn't like the singer, or we didn't like it when you sing, or we didn't like that album or this style. But I think all of our favorite bands that we know of, like mine, for example, I've got all the CDs and from AC/DC to Slayer to Cannibal Corpse to Guns N' Roses to anything. And in those bands where they have more than one or two albums, I don't listen to all the records. I love the bands and I have my favorites, but there's some records I have here that I don't listen to, but I'll listen to the other ones that I like by the same band. And that's because when you're a musician, you might try hard all the time to write good songs and good albums, but sometimes it just doesn't all come together and it doesn't work. So yeah, I think that's the goal. As long as you're honest and you love what you're doing and you take care of the business side so you can continue, man, you got a fun life.
Speaking of things all coming together, the first single for the album, I Am Warfare, was released in October as the first taste of the album. Do you feel that this song is representative of the atmosphere of the album?
No, that one we called as a band, we called that the Slayer-esque tune. That had a little vibe of, sort of the power of a slower Slayer song, and there was the main chorus riff definitely has some Slayer influence in it. And that was kind of, in a sense, my little personal tribute to my favorite band, which is two bands. It's Van Halen and Slayer. If I had to give a top 5 of my favorite bands in my life, it would be Slayer tied with Van Halen. And two completely different bands and two different complete reasons why I like those bands. And that was, I guess, knowing that Slayer were on their final run and, seeing them in Montreal, Canada, and seeing them in, I think it was called Laval, Canada, seeing them in Newcastle here over in England and seeing them on some of the shows, saying goodbye, that kind of stuff. It was just fitting that I just felt I wanted to put that out first. And it threw a lot of people off because they're like, okay, this is an interesting song that's kind of heavy, but where's the real standout stuff? And then I released a song called Psycho Ward, and what was the other one? Can't remember. Armed to the Teeth. So Psycho Ward came out and then Armed to the Teeth, and people were like, okay, there we go. That's what we want. But I think the two recent songs I mentioned that were released were more of the old school Annihilator, and the first one, Armed to the I Am Warfare, was more of a dark Slayer-y kind of tribute vibe, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so speaking of Psycho Ward, you guys kind of paid homage to Rush in that song, and I never figured that Rush was a musical influence for you. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how it played a role in your musical evolution? Yeah,
there's some albums like we have called Carnival Diablos is one, and there's one called King of the Kill. I'm thinking there's another one too, and the song Psycho Ward, where I sort of break it down. I guess that's the funny way of saying it. Where there's a section usually in the middle, but this is more of a melodic thing that it's almost like the Police. The band The Police and Rush. Rush were influenced by the band The Police, and self-admittedly, like Rush admitted way back that was one of their main influences. And I was influenced, being Canadian, by Rush because they were our national heroes. They were like not just a band; they were part of Canadian culture. There's 3 bands there. I'm sure there's more, but the 3 that stand out were a sort of Canada-only band that most people only knew them if they were from Canada. A band called Tragically Hip, and Bryan Adams, and Rush. Those were part of the fabric of Canada. If you had to send a little thing about Canada off into space with the top 100 things, you got to mention those 3 bands. So I don't know. I think I always had that Rush vibe in there, but I wasn't so much of a prog player. I wasn't more into that prog kind of music. I was more into the hard rock and heavy metal stuff, But being Canadian and loving Rush, it sneaks into your music once in a while.
So you've mentioned a few of your musical influences so far, especially as they tie into this album. What would you see as the unifying theme or concept really driving Ballistic Sadistic?
I think musically speaking, most of the songs, I'm going to guess 8 or 9 out of 10 of the 10 songs, the music is coming from a personal issue that I experienced in 2019 for most of the year. And it was something personal and private. There was a person that was threatening this sounds like a big way of describing it, but it sounds dramatic, but the person, without describing what was happening, the person was threatening the mental health, well-being of my family, my kids and wife and myself, by making threats and scaring us, scaring all of us a little bit. But whatever, this person didn't live here. It was just somebody that my wife knew from the past, and police and court were involved and things like that. So I became my role became a kind of a protector, and I had a lot of anger for what this person had done and was doing to this family. And once that was resolved, I was left with a year's worth of stress and having your guard up and being tense. And you got to release that somehow. And I'm not someone who goes to the gym every day and works out. I'm not someone who, and I don't turn to alcohol or drugs and stuff. And, my way of releasing anything that's traumatic or stressful or anger is not taking it out on the family or a bottle or stuff. It's really going by myself into my studio and saying F the world and writing a riff. And that's where, and then lyrically you can get more out in the lyrics as well, which some of it came out kind of specific to my experience in 2019 with that person and family crisis, and some of it was just general, but I could tell the vibe was still and the anger was there. And that's it. When the record was done, it was almost like I was healed. It was like, it's out of me. It's out of my system. I'm all good now. I'm back to sanity is back and calm and relaxing. And that's kind of how I've dealt with a lot of things in my life that might have been otherwise damaging. Some people meditate. Some people take care of their health with going to the gym. Some people do this and that. Well, I'm an artist, so I make music and I deal with stuff and forget about stuff through the music. Woo, that was well done. I don't think I've said it that well ever.
Well, it was very well said, and it takes so much strength to put yourself out there as an artist, especially to such a large fan base. Do you ever have difficulty reliving some of these very personal experiences when performing your music or talking about it?
No, I think maybe talking about it occasionally, yeah. Like, it's uncomfortable to mention that I went through some kind of family trauma in 2019, and that's why I don't like really being specific, but that's just part of life, talking about a song, and I could refuse to talk about it, but that's silly. It's something I created, and if it had something to do with it spawned from some shitty times, then that's life, right? But I think once you get it out of your system, hey, in a sense, the negative stuff that happened to us gave me a better record. So there's a positive spin-off to an otherwise really crappy situation for 4 of us. And, in return, here we go. I'm putting a record out overseas in Europe, I think. And this is not meant to show off. It's just meant to show you how you can turn something into something different. I think our label messaged me a couple of days ago and said we got a number 2 album in Germany on Amazon. And you think, oh, Amazon, that's for me as an old school person, I'd rather hear on the charts or on in the stores your CDs selling, but I guess it's a big deal to be number 2 on Amazon in Germany when there's that many million people there. So I think that unique phone call saying that, hey, dude, you're number 2. Your record's number 2. That's a direct result from the inspiration I got from really crappy times for me and my family for 2019. So in a way, I got to credit this, little bit of success before the album is out because of that person and those times.
It's so interesting hearing just how much of yourself that you're pouring into this project. And from what I've understood, Annihilator has always been a Jeff Waters project. But this album seems to be one where you've truly taken the weight of it all on your shoulders, both in concept and in production. In 2015, you reprised your role as vocalist and took the lead on the production of this album. What impact do you feel that adding these roles has had on your performance, has it given you more control?
Well, right from the beginning, the history of Annihilator, which is not known to most people in North America, because if you're my age, you and into metal, you might have in this type of thrash metal kind of thing or heavy metal, you would have known who we were from '89 to '91 in the States, and maybe to '93. It's kind of almost been like a solo project from the beginning. It really, behind the scenes with the business stuff and writing and stuff, there has been, of course, other musicians co-writing and in some ways involved in other things, mostly just in co-writing some songs. But generally, I guess you could look at the whole catalog and go, I've vastly written the majority of the lyrics and the drumming even, and guitar, bass lines. I played bass on, I think, every song on every studio album except maybe 2 or 3 songs in total. So I've always kind of had it as a solo project, but the labels would, of course, market it more as and put it out there as more of a band because, as they said, solo projects don't sell. It's a band that sells. So Annihilator was always called a band, and it kind of is. It's half a band because in the studio and the behind the scenes, it's more of my solo project. And when we go on tour, as for example, just pop up something on YouTube if you're not used to this band or never heard of us or whatever. Just pop Annihilator Athens 2019 or Annihilator Moscow 2019 or something on YouTube, and you can see what looks like a band because I've got musicians in the band now I've stuck with for quite a while, for many years, but I did a huge turnover in the last 25 years of musicians, not the last 5 years, but the first 25, where on tour I would hire everybody to play, and even in the studio hire drummers and that, but on tour it does look more like a band because it's not the Jeff Waters project, it's a band, and in fact some lineups would have a frontman singer that was, I'd stand in the back and let the frontman go out and so to speak, steal the show because that's what they wanted to do and they loved it. And I was like, hey, fine, I just want to play guitar. But since I've been singing, that adds another role. I've had my own recording studio, 4 different recording studios, 3 in Canada and 1 here now in the UK. And I've always been from the beginning inclined to be in a studio and learn more and more about engineering and mixing and mastering and producing and that. So, hey, if you don't have a real job and you got 35 years where you can be involved in music and that, you can learn a lot of things and you can do a lot of things. And the studio is my second career hobby. It's just as important and just as time-consuming as playing with Annihilator. Being in the studios is, the other half of it.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you've learned in terms of production and mixing and mastering? Because I'm sure that most people just think of you as, a guitarist and a vocalist. What do you do behind the scenes, and what's influenced and inspired you there?
I think when I started out making, in the mid-'80s, making a couple of demos that got the band signed, there was these cassette tapes that you would record on, and the things were called 4-tracks, and 4-track machines, and you could record 4 different takes or instruments on those, and then you'd run out of tracks if you want to do backing vocals and solos, so you'd have to do what they call bouncing the tracks and all that stuff. And the Beatles, I guess, George Martin and the Beatles were the first, I can't remember who invented Les Paul. I'm not sure who invented the multi-track, but it was very basic engineering I was learning when I was doing demos, and that information, that what I learned and what I learned then, recording on those little cassette things, and at the time with no internet, I was buying every single magazine to do with recording in studios, and there was 20 of them out there at that time, and it was not about sampling and computer music. It was all about analog recording. Everybody was doing things similar on a special tape machines and that. So it was a very big art form back then too. I would buy it, and then I would eventually get signed and went into some good studios, some of the best studios in the world at one point. And very quickly on my 4th album, when I finally made a good chunk of money, I bought a house and built a recording studio, and that was in '94. That was my first studio, and that was it. Since '94 to the year 2020, I've had a studio. So, and in the studio, you learn all about the equipment, and you use it practically with other bands, and you do your own albums, and you either hate it or you love it. And I love it, so it's a lot of fun.
How would you identify yourself as an artist? If someone said, what do you do? Would you say that you're a guitarist, a vocalist, a producer?
Guitar. Yeah, the first thing you say, I play guitar in a metal band. So that's how I kind of, if I'm asked, what do you do for a living? I go, I play guitar in a metal band. And then you can usually, with most people, you see the eyes roll and they're thinking, okay, this guy's, he's a musician. And, you get the stereotypical kind of answer from most people. But I'm kind of lucky in the sense that, I mostly, I don't socialize too much, but, when your hobby and your job is in music and you get to tour with a lot of great bands over the decades and meet them and that, you end up having friends that are in the music business. So you don't really hang out much with people that are outside of what you kind of do, so they all know about you and you know about them. And that's funny because then you don't really have that, you don't have to sit there and just go, do I need to explain to this person that if you're 53 and you've had your studio and 17 records, that you must know something about business. You must have some kind of bank account, because a lot of people look at you and think, oh, must be drugs, alcohol, and broke, and a womanizer. That's pretty well what you usually get stereotypically. It's ridiculous.
Well, and that's not fair to you. You're running a business and a band that has had international acclaim for years, decades even.
Yeah, but it's not actually, I brought it up there, but it's not actually something I ever think about, or it almost never comes up. It only would come up if you're, like I have a 24-year-old son, but when he was younger, as soon as some parents found out that, oh, that guy's in a heavy metal band, and they at the time, my son's 24 now, but if you go back to, 19, 20 years ago, when he was 4 or 5 years old, and you go to the school in the daytime, they think, okay, he must not have a job. He's got long hair at the time, and he's a heavy metal musician, So you would get literally, parents would either look at you, it would be funny, it was actually funny. They'd look at you like, drugs, alcohol, womanizer, broke, or they'd look at, or they'd look at you and think, oh, cool, I wish I could do that. It's like you kind of had both, the best of both on that one, but it's kind of an interesting life, right? And then when people discover that you're not what they think you are, they're quite shocked. They're quite shocked about that.
Even just from a few minutes of conversation, I can just tell how important your family is to you. You're a husband, father, and a stepfather, so you have a full life to pursue outside of Annihilator's legacy. How is life off the big stage, especially with the move that you've made?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, again, if you take 24 hours in the daytime, and you say, okay, I may be married and I may have kids and I have a job playing in a band and I have a recording studio. You would think that's an extremely busy life. And to some people, oh yeah, it's unbelievably busy. At the same time, I make time for the wife and the kids and the music and the studio. And the way you do it is sometimes you can treat this as a 9-to-5 job and you make sure that you shut it all off at 5 and you do what, quote, normal people would do in normal relationships. But then you also sort of stack it up where, well, I just went on a 2-month tour and I was very busy 2 weeks before the tour rehearsing with my band and they were getting all my attention. I was away for 2 months. And then, a couple of weeks before the rehearsals, I had to set up a lot of things. So that's 3 months where I'm kind of not all there. I'm not really there for the family. Even physically, I'm there for a few weeks. But so I have the opportunity, though, to, when I'm done the tour, to stay home and do nothing but be Family Guy, right? And that's what I've done. I took the December off, didn't do any music, and I spent a good solid month with my family. So, and with social media now, or with Facebook, and you can video your wife and kids anytime, and with flights sometimes, they can fly in or meet you at a show in London or wherever. My wife came down as well to Athens to see me. So it's not like a terrible thing. Where it would be terrible, it would be if I was getting drunk all the time and not giving a damn and not making the time for family as well. But I think, it gives you the inspiration to, if you have good family life, well, it gives you inspiration for music. And if your music's going well, then it gives you good family life and time for your family.
Do you feel that it's like a switch that you flip on or off? Like, oh, I'm a family man or I'm a musician today? Or is it something that's always fluid and dynamic?
Yeah, when you're writing a record and recording, you really are absent, in a sense. And no matter how you try to shut it off at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and say job's done, you try hard to say, okay, walk back from the studio, walk into the house, hi kids, hi wife, everything's, but in your brain, until you get there the next morning back into the studio, you are fighting the riff you were writing, or what can I do with this riff, or what the things are going through your head. And that's the life of this type of artist. That's just the way it works for some musicians and painters and artists and all that stuff. You try to do it, but people know that you're not there. But then that's the cool thing. Once the touring thing, or once your thing is done, now you do the opposite. You just don't even think about the music. You just don't touch a guitar. You don't do anything. You just, you focus on something totally different. Hey, look, there are a lot of successful marriages and family things with military personnel. You hear about the, military personnel and entertainers and movie stars and rock stars and all that having divorces and high divorce rates, but you also see a lot of them with military people sometimes go out on a military, a submarine, nuclear sub for 4 months at a time, and yet they still stay together and have a family. And so it can be done. You just have to really prioritize things. And, if you're going out drinking with your buddies, or you're doing this and that, you're not really prioritizing things like you should if you're on a nuclear sub for 4 months. Same with me. If I went out with my buddies to clubs and stuff like that, it's kind of like not that time of my life. It's the wrong thing. It
sounds like you've really fought to find balance between your family, your career, and even within your music. And so thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you want to say about the upcoming album? Any future projects that you have?
Yeah, no future projects. No, right now we're just recovering from that 2-month tour and the holidays, and we're back at the album release now. And now it's in the next few weeks. It's the release, but also working on where we're going to play, where we're going to do shows, and endorsement things with a guitar company, and all these little and big things that we're planning and just that are normal to do, and they're exciting and they're fun. And we get on our Facebook page or website, we'll announce all the stuff as they get sorted out in the next month. And I just hope that anybody who's listening to this just gives us a shot and has a listen. If you haven't heard of us, then at least we got the internet. You can find out a little bit about it. Give it a shot. You haven't listened. There's lots of great bands out there. So if you don't like my band, then go find another one.
As someone that's listened to the album and really enjoys it, I would definitely recommend the same. It's a stunning album, and I can't wait for it to come out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, Jeff, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and I wish you all the best on your upcoming release. And thanks again for your time.
Great. Thank you, and have a great time, and I appreciate the interest. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you again. Maybe I'll see you sometime. Thanks.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
And that was Jeff Waters from Annihilator, discussing their upcoming album Ballistic, Sadistic, which will be released on January 24th. Be sure to follow Sonic Perspectives on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be closing with a single from Ballistic Sadistic. This is Psycho Wars.